7 a.m. Good morning from wherever you're tuning in from. In case you're just joining us, this is Morning Prime. Siasa Fiesta is a theme. But before we get into the murky waters of politics, we're taking a look at the latest that has been encompassed in today's dailies. We just reviewed one of the top stories of the day, all to do with the KEMSA scandal. And now the axe has fallen on a couple of top officials at KEMSA and the Ministry of Health, following President William Ruto talking tough during that joint interview that was held on Sunday. So apart from that, other stories making headlines, including what's on the front page of the Standard on tax. Ruto is between a rock and a hard place. All to do with some of the forthcoming answers when he was hard-pressed to explain the new levies he wants to introduce when the cost of living is at an all-time high. Experts wondering about the economic rationale of the proposed taxation measures. That's the story we now want to evaluate right now. You can find more details on pages 6 and 8 of the Standard. Just to reintroduce my panelists for those who are joining us right now, I'm joined by Makali Mulu, who's the Member of Parliament, Kitui Central, equally joined by Fred Okango, the Secretary of Political Affairs in KANU, equally the mouthpiece of Azimio la Umoja Coalition Party, Honorable Titus Lote, Member of Parliament, Kachiliba constituency, and Isaac Mwaura, who is definitely a seasoned politician right now in the CAS position as we speak. Anyway, gentlemen, let's talk about that particular story on the front page of the Standard. Of course, echoing what President William Ruto had to say during that joint interview. And it seems the jury's out there, because according to the Kenya Kwanza administration, they are adamant that borrowing is not the way to go. We have to, live within our means. And that means in one or the other expanding the tax bracket. So we have, we actually meet the set collections that we have made in terms of financing the 2023-2024 budget. But equally, right now, a lot of talk in terms of the deductions, and we had President William Ruto actually defend himself when it came to the housing fund, of which he has received criticism. Interesting times. So I'll just start with you, Isaac Mwaura. Perhaps generally, your reaction to the interview that President William Ruto had just this Sunday, but equally on a couple of issues touching on the cost of living. What's your evaluation of his response? Does he feel the pressing times? Because many might argue introducing such taxation measures when the cost of living is at an all-time high is, a little bit insensitive. Well, what say you about this?
Yeah, first and foremost, I didn't like the way those young men were trying to harass the president. I think they were trying to become the next so-and-so, maybe Hussein Mohammed, and it didn't come out very well. Please, next time when you're interviewing a president, have some kind of decorum, because by the end of the day, some of them are not even allowing him to finish responding to questions. And I don't want to mention names, but some of them are my friends. I may tell them as much when we meet in person. Okay. We have a lot of interaction, like between you and us, Jesse, because politicians and journalists will always work together. But then, having said that, I was very, let's face it, when you're running a country, and Dr. Makali Mulu is an economist, you have to balance between production and consumption, between taxation and encouraging productivity. Now, that's where we have a problem. It's like a mixed bag, because on one hand you want to increase, to facilitate people to create jobs. And what is the role of economy really in terms of policy is to reduce inflation and to create jobs. And creating jobs is basically the way you redistribute wealth, because it is the easiest way to do things that way. And from my background in development economics, we are in a very dire strait, because we are back to where I can say African countries were in 1990. We have a huge odious debt that we procured, possibly in some dubious ways, but we have to deal with it. So the question is, when you're in a hole, what do? You stop digging. We have a government that is basically quite huge for a small country like ours, because immediately the first charge of our revenue is paying debt, about 1.3 trillion or thereabout, but also another 400 billion or so to counties, the 47 odd counties. But then would you say, for example, that those counties are not developing their places? I beg to differ. I think I've seen the power of devolution. There could be misappropriation, but certainly there's more engagement through devolution. It's the real revolution. Now, let me come to the specifics, Jesse. Yes, indeed. And also you see a very interesting balancing act by the president, on one hand, to give concessions to for about 15 or so, 15 to 20, tax measures that are going to help productivity, like, charging more tax on importation of fish, which will help the local fisherfolk and the industry. The issue of production of cement and clinker. You can see because we have local capacity, the issue of steel, the issue of furniture also, so that our carpenters and joiners can be able to produce more and create jobs. You will also see the issue of reducing the power of the KRA commissioner from increasing the excise duty, according to inflation. Reduction, for example, of the bank charges in terms of the transactions. That also will encourage more people to bank. And you can see a finance bill that is aimed at encouraging the saving culture. And that brings us, for example, to the issue of the housing strategy. It is one of the 5 pillars of the plan under the Kenya Kwanza Manifesto, which is one of the very well thought out plans. And what is the argument behind it? If you are able to contribute 3% of your basic pay, then it goes into this housing fund. The idea is first you save for about 7 years, and this money, you can get it back. You can buy a house, you can transfer it to a beneficiary like your child, or you can even transfer the money to a retirement, kitty, benefit something. So it's not really money that is being lost. But then at least in terms of the economies of scale, we'll have a huge pool where then government can actually be able to sustain its housing in a program. And why housing? Housing because, Jesse, one, we are urbanizing at a very fast rate. And if you are looking at decimation of land into smithereens, you look at central Kenya, where I come from, and land is no longer viable that way. If you look at Kisii, for example, it's the other issue also, and many other places that I may not be able to mention. So that then very arable land is being turned to being not very productive because of this issue of inheritance. And you can see now even women are inheriting land because that's what the Constitution talks about, anti-discrimination measures. So then housing is not just a question of people owning homes. And by the way, just to say, because that is the biggest contestation, we need about 250,000 houses every year. But the local market is producing about 50,000 houses. So then if I, as Isaac Mora, having been in Parliament for 2 terms, I've been able to own a home through a mortgage, why would it be there for the other local Kenyan and have affordable housing for that matter? What would happen if we have more housing is that the cost of building will also come down. And you can see the whole of value chain, the standardization of windows and doors for our Juakali, artisans and all of that. Okay. So, and it's also a way of creating jobs. For every one house constructed, you create between 5 to 8 jobs. You have 5 million youth who do not have jobs. Where are we going to take them from? We have TVETs now in every of the other, constituencies. In fact, there's a very good one in Kitui Central, at TVET. And of course, we promoted our polytechnics to be national technical universities like the one in Mombasa and here in Nairobi. So you have a lot of manpower, which we are even exporting. Now Germany needs 250,000 people. Of course, we have been doing that in the Middle East and Canada and what have you. And yet we can actually be able to get the what you call the advantage of the youth dividend, because our median age is 20 years. One of the youngest nations in this world. After Uganda, which is 19. So how do we leverage on that? How do we make sure that we have a working Kenya? It's through such kind of programs, so that Kenya is turned into a construction site. But then somebody will say, oh, this money, it is succession. No, it's not really. And we will not benefit from borrowing. Because right now we are paying over 1 trillion shillings to other countries that have been able to give us their savings. What about if we have our own savings?
Okay, interesting. And as you come in, Lotte, we're talking on a day where, there's pain at the pump, unfortunately. The prices of petroleum products have sort of gone up, and this is even before that 8% is instituted within the VAT on petroleum products. Well, when you speak to residents in Kacheliba, do they feel the taxes are a little bit too high? Because we heard from the president, he mentions if we are to be at par with South Africa and the rest, they tax even higher. Kenya is at a lower rate, I think he said, of 14% currently. So is the message the same? What the president was saying, bado taxes haziko high, is that being echoed by residents in Kacheliba who are not complaining or are complaining?
Well, thank you, Rogers. Now that you've mentioned Kacheliba, I will take this time to greet the people of Kacheliba because it's important. They are the people that have actually made me sit here. Two, I will actually want to say one thing about the whole issue of taxation before I actually give the perspective of how the people of Kacheliba and the people of Kenya feel about this tax issue. One, the issue to deal with housing is not a tax. I think we're talking about a levy, because taxation is the amount of money that you're giving to government to produce or to do something for government. A levy is actually a saving, a personal saving, because if you look at this kind of a levy that is supposed to be used for housing, is to encourage Kenyans to save. I think for any country to continue to grow, you need to have a culture of saving. And because of the high economic times that we have, people find it very difficult to save. And I think what the president is doing is actually encouraging people to save in a manner that will build this country. I'll give you an example. On Sunday, I was in Addis Ababa. Addis Ababa, this is a country that is landlocked. It does not have petroleum. It does not have, even the tourism industry is very low. But if you look at the kind of plans that they do, as you leave the airport, you actually see a robust government funding in the housing schemes. You actually can see a good plan of how Ethiopia is doing in Addis Ababa. And I think if we are not keen, we are going to be overtaken by smaller countries. Rwanda, for example, has actually gone into housing. And people thought Kagame was a dictator when he was actually telling people that we are going to save for housing. If you go to Rwanda now, and I think Rwanda is becoming a big tourism destination because people want to go and see the kind of transformation a president that was called a dictator could do. So I want to tell you, just like what Isaac has said, and I think we have all agreed, first of all, to deal with the issue of corruption. All of us here, including my brother here, all of us have actually agreed that what the president has done is right. Let's go to the records of this president. When he was in the Minister of Education, this is a person that believed that we can transform our education. And the kind of reform that we see in our education now, in higher education, was actually as a result of his thinking. At that time, people thought President Ruto, then was a minister, was mad. And even when he went to agriculture, he actually introduced a lot of things that we are actually enjoying right now. So sometimes the people that come to transform our economies, the people that transform our houses, sometimes touches on places that we are very uncomfortable with. But if you want to continue becoming comfortable in the things that we do, I tell you, Rogers, we are not going to transform as this country. As a country, we need sometimes to be very uncomfortable for us to move. We will always be saying, in 1986, Kenya was like Korea. In fact, Korea came and borrowed the scripts of Kenya to develop. What was the difference? We had the script, but Korea took the action. For me, I believe it is the right thing that we have people to save by hook and means, and especially those that are actually working, because it is a privilege to get work in this country. It is a privilege to get employment. And so when you get employment, why don't you save for the other Kenyans to also enjoy the kind of benefits that you are getting? Isaac has actually spoken about it. If we save, we are able to get enough capital to build houses. And when we are building houses, first, we are transforming the economies. If you look at the recent statistics about Africa, 10 slums, the biggest slums in Africa, 3 are found in Kenya. And we are actually calling ourselves a developing country. Actually, we are actually saying we are one of the most advanced countries in Africa. And yet we carry the 3 biggest slums in Africa. Are we not ashamed of ourselves to say that as you come into JKIA, the only thing you can see is mud houses, slums in Kibera and all these other places? We need to actually say, gentlemen, it's true, we are a developing country, we are actually moving ahead of our peers, but we need to do something better. we need to save for our country. We need to actually transform the image and improve the kind of situation that we are in.
Right.
And I think every president, from Moi to Kibaki to Uhuru, now to Ruto, has actually been speaking about housing. The problem is the non-implementation, because it is painful to implement this thing. And I think it now requires a president such as Ruto to look unto the Kenyans on the eye and say, listen, gentlemen, we need to move with this agenda and not just talking about it. And so for me, I'll support, and I'll tell Kenyans, this is not a tax, this is a levy, because for those that are contributing and are not qualified to get the housing, they are going to get back their money after 7 years. They can reinvest this money back. They can do anything else with this money. They can even actually transfer it to a relative or anybody else.
Okay.
That basically means the president is helping Kenyans to save. Otherwise, saving in this country is becoming difficult. People, every Friday, if you go to the clubs, Saturday and Sunday, people are buzzing, people are enjoying, people are not saving, people are actually using things that they should have actually saved to improve the economy of this country for pleasure.
Okay.
And so let people be forced, so that we see very few people go to clubs on Friday, so that we see people sit with their family, so that our economy start improving for us to see housing.
So you support the compulsory...
I support the compulsory saving culture of this country. It is actually for the good of the country.
And that's what residents in Kachiliba say.
At the end of it all, at the end of it all, we look at the good that comes out of it.
Right.
Because if we become complacent and say, let us not go through the pain, we will always have the biggest slums in Africa. We will always have unstructured housing schemes. Our peers are overtaking us until we do something. And I think the thing that needs to be done should be done now. And I support the president for that.
Okay, so
in terms of the taxation, for every country, we are seeing Kenyans running out of this country. And if you ask them, why are you getting out of this country? They say we want to go to places where we can get employment. We want to go to places where housing are good. We want to go to places where the infrastructure are good. The people of those countries actually pay taxes seriously to build their economies. If we do not want to pay taxes for our own selves, why do you want to go and enjoy the taxes that are being paid by others? I think it is time for us to be proud as Kenyans and say we can also do it. If Korea did it on our script, we can do it as Kenyans by ourselves. So I support that kind, because at the end of it all, it's not money that is getting lost. I either get a house or I get a refund of my money to do something else with it. At that time, that will be a pool of money.
Okay.
We will have taken 1,000 shillings every weekend for beer for 1 year. Probably after 7 years, I would probably have 500, 600, 700,000 or 1 million shillings that I can use to do something very productive.
All right.
And so I think for me, let us not try to falsify everything that is being done because we are looking at it politically. Because it is very easy for us to say, oh, Kenyans are now going to the pain. Let us also look at beyond the pain. Are we going to benefit? And I think what Kenyans are nearly only afraid of is that probably they pull this money together and then somebody misappropriate it. And the president is sending a strong message. Gentlemen, we are pulling resources from people painfully. Gentlemen, we are not going to misappropriate it. And the reason why you are seeing heads are starting to roll even below a year when the president is in office. So for me, I think he's doing it right. Let's pull our resources, but also let's guard our resources from being misused by anybody.
Okay.
In terms of petrol, petroleum,
sure,
because you asked me about
let's
that.
get your take.
Go to Europe. Go to Europe. Go to Americas. Go to our neighboring countries here. Petrol, for me, I'll say, is retailing at a cheaper price than it was retailing last year. Why? Because the government last year was actually subsidizing. That means there was a hidden cost that was not seen by Kenyans, but we were going to pay it anyway as loans. And so if I was paying 100 bob, probably the government was given another 100 bob. So it was going at 200 shillings, but I will only see 100 bob as a Kenyan. But at the end of it all, I'll be taxed to pay for the loan that actually subsidized the next 100. Now, all that has been removed. We are supposed to pay it through the pump, and we see the whole figure. So if it is going at 160 now, 180 now, it is totally 180. There is no subsidy. I'm not supposed to pay for a loan from China or from wherever later. So it is good to see things as it is than to be cheated that you are paying less, and yet in actual sense you are paying a lot, because even this loan that you took will also attract an interest, and so it probably could be higher than 200 and something because of the interest. So for me, let it be laid bare. Let us feel the pain, but let the pain not translate into a future pain. let the pain be translated into a future benefit.
Okay, so holistic thinking, we can put it that way. He's definitely taking a look at the housing fund, says he supports the saving aspect of it. You know, Kenya should be a saving country. Equally on petroleum products, equally, EPRA has mentioned today that the prices have gone up due to the subsidies being removed from petroleum products. Is this the way to go? Because what we hear from Azimio is that, of course, we're being told you cry now, so we laugh later, tighten your belts now for future prosperity. But the question you keep on raising is the food on the table should be on my table. Where is it? If it's not, should I be planning about the future? Well, I don't have food right now. What say you about some of the proposals around the finance bill?
First of all, I really want to congratulate the journalists who put Honorable Ruto to task to explain some of these issues that are affecting majority, if not all Kenyans. And they did a good job. Congratulations to them. I encourage them to continue doing that. That level of accountability, that level of proactiveness is what we want to see as a form of public participation in the aspect of our governance. Yeah. Number two, I've listened to my good friend from Kacheliba. I am wondering if he actually lives in this country. Now, the finance bill that has been proposed by the Kenya Kwanza regime can be looked like a punishment, as a punishment to the people of Kenya in many aspects. For the first time, I saw Honorable Ruto struggling to explain to Kenyans why the 3%. And majority of his people have struggled. The unions have rejected it. The workers have rejected it. They have told us that, you know, this 3% is saving. Fair enough. But it is compulsory. Jesse Rogers, I want your team and yourself to check the meaning of tax in operational definition. Compulsory deduction levied on the worker's employee by the on the worker's income by the government on their business profits. You can baptize this 3% any name you want in the world, but for as long as it is taking away on the disposable income of the worker who currently is affected by so many other deductions. 2.76% NHIF, 6% pension, 30 to 35% pay, 3% housing, whatever you want to call it. That pay slip is strangled. I'm not sure if the people of Kacheliba, that's what they want to see. I'm not sure about that. Number two, the regime in place came into power on the promise of supporting the lowly placed. They said that they are going to uplift the lives of the majority who are down there. They call it bottom up. My good friend, Honorable Maura, we debate with him a lot of times in other platforms. He knows that, and that's what he tells me all the time. But look, today, the most affected are the very, very people. You earn 10,000 as a probably civil servant who works in whatever place, and your pay slip is going through reduction. Then you tell us that this is on the short term. Let's take the pain on the short term and then enjoy tomorrow. Kenyans want food now. If you are feeling hungry for food, you want it now. You don't say, I'm hungry now, but I'll eat next year or next week. You want it now. The tax regime that you have seen is a regime that is going to affect the lowly placed. I'll give an example. These gentlemen and ladies have told us that now the young people who are creative in the digital economy or in the digital industry will now pay the withholding 15% from zero. You become innovative, creative, get in the digital space, you are taxed 15%. No one cares about them. We have seen the tax tribunal. What they're saying, if you have got outstanding issues, you have to pay 20% of the dispute before you get justice. These are issues that we have been raising as Azimio. But we are saying that while this is going on, who is speaking about it? Because they keep on changing the name of this 3%, that even their own civil servants have rejected, and they have said they are not going to support it, the unions. If the unions themselves have said, this is a punishment that we're not going to look into, When you tell me that I'm going to compulsorily deduct 3% of your pay as a saving, and you baptize it at patriotic contribution, and then you tell me after 7 years you can decide whatever you want to do with it. The government of Kenya has got a contract with the people for only 5 years. If you perform well, they put you back into office. If you do a shoddy job, they send you home. What if, after those years, you go home, and then the new regime comes and say, no, we want to do or undo some of these economic policies that were put in place, as you have seen happening today? What will happen to those contributions? We have seen mismanagement of such schemes, NHIF, NSSF. The people of Kenya are acting on previous experiences with previous regimes and administrations where they have seen mismanagement. Whether you try and do something now, but in their mind they still believe that these are the same very people that have mismanaged funds from all along. Public service is systemic. It is not systematic. It is systemic. And we know that. Now, for me, and for us in Azimio, we are looking at this bill as a tsunami of taxes that is going to affect the majority of people, particularly the jobless young people that have got nowhere to go. We must stand out and speak for them. We want to encourage the members of parliament, when they will be walking into that house to debate this finance bill 2023, let them consider the people that they represent, how they react, how they feel towards this tsunami of taxation. If they feel indeed that this country, you must tax your way to prosperity, then let them approve that bill. But if they feel that they can address these issues and make it better for the majority of Kenyans who are suffering today, then they should do the right thing. I want to submit to the people of Kenya today, Jesse, that as an ordinary Kenyan, I look at these things on a personal level and I feel that we can make it better. They might not be perfect, but we can make it better. Because, Jesse, today, as we speak, there are women and men and children and young people in Gorogocho, Kibera, Madare, who are looking at what is happening and they say, you want to tell us that you are going to subsidize production. A very good idea, welcome. But on the long term, now what is happening to them, they want to see solution. Particularly, a leader who told them that immediately I put this Bible down, the tax will go down, the cost of living will go down, cost of hunger will go down, cost of fuel will go down. They are not seeing it. Then you now tell them, even the gas that I told you that will come at a low cost, you will have to wait longer because we have to deal with issues of, cylinder, and then we address the gas issue later.
Okay.
Let me tell you, Jesse, we must be careful of what we tell our people as we represent them, because we cannot change the goalposts every single minute. We must address the issues pronto. The people of Kenya are suffering now. And that's why Azimio says, taxation is good. We say in Kenya, kulipa ushuru ni kujitegemea. We strongly believe in that. We must pay taxes. But listen, as we expand the tax base to collect more, because basically, in my view, this 3% is a way of the regime collecting revenue. There's nothing savings here. If I have an arrangement with my employer and have a sack where I save, I'll continue saving. If I have an arrangement of a mortgage with my bank, I'll do that. But if I don't have, I must be given an opportunity also to save and get that mortgage at affordable rate without affecting largely my disposable income, because you are driving me into poverty. You are driving poverty. That is the truth. We want to ask the proposers or the promoters of this bill, please consider the majority of Kenyans who are not, or who are helpless at this moment, who are not able to even remove 200 shillings from their little income to contribute into an affordable housing scheme that they'll get after 90 years when they are long dead. We want to ask you, provide an alternative. We want to ask our members of parliament, both Azimio and Kenya Kwanza, when you walk into that house, consider the large population that is out there that do not have anything and they are surviving on the meager resources to put food on the table for their children. VAT, PAYE, NHIF, NSSF, all these are form of deductions and taxations that are affecting the disposable income of our people.
Interesting. And just before we cross over to Makali, I mean, you've mentioned that as Azimio, you're in support of, kulipa ushuru ni kujitegemea.
Absolutely.
So at the end of the day, if we are pushing towards expanding the tax bracket, I mean, the main question would be, where will the money come from? If you're not in support of perhaps the housing fund expanding this, where exactly will the money come from?
We are not in support of high taxation.
Right.
We're in support of expanding the tax base, but lowering the system of taxation such that majority can pay but at a lower cost. And we are saying, particularly on the issue of housing levy, that Honorable Ruto struggled to explain. His people are struggling to explain. That issue, we must discuss it as a people. How did they arrive at 3%? Why not 1%? Why not 2%? Who informed that decision? They say the economic team. But look, the principle of public participation demands that the views of the public are incorporated in the final decision. They have made a decision. They're taking through a bill. If this bill goes through, it becomes a law. You are bound by it. You will contribute. And they're saying, you like it, you don't like it. The other day, my good friend, Honorable Soro, said that government never loses. And he promised his boss that that bill will go through. If you listen to how they are speaking, Jesse, you can see somebody forcing something down your throat.
All right. Interesting. So, Makali, from where you sit as an Azimio Member of Parliament, what do you make about the contribution by the president, touching on the finance bill, the housing fund, you name it? And equally, at the end of the day, we know parliamentarians will definitely play a critical role in this bill passing as is or altering one or two things. What's your contribution generally?
Jesse, this finance bill 2023 has been debated in almost all, think of anywhere, even in bars, people are discussing it. And I watched the president, and I must say that it was good for Kenyans to watch their president discuss these issues. Because at the end of the day, he takes all the responsibility. From where I sit, both as a member, but more so as an economist, because when lawyers talk, they talk about law. This is an area, I have 3 degrees in economics. So when I talk matters economics, I talk with authority. And there are basics of economics. And that's why, to me, when you talk about cost of living, people keep on confusing cost of living and compare. There are things you don't compare. For example, anytime you do a comparison between a country and another country, you must look at a number of factors to see whether they are the same. A simple definition of cost of living is that is the amount of money you require to be able to meet a basket of basic needs. And in most cases, they are listed: food, housing, and all that. And that's why at times when you compare a country with another one, unless you have the figures in terms of cost of living, you might be getting it very wrong. And when I watched the president, I could see some misses in terms of basics and more so principles of economics. For example, when you compare the issue of, when you say our revenue to GDP ratio, which is, we were saying about 14, and some countries are at 25, you must then unpack your taxes. And what is happening in this country is that most of the people who are taxed are the salaried Kenyans, people who earn salaries. And in most countries, you find that's where people go, because it is easier to collect. It's a matter of every month, just earn 100,000, get your tax, get it to the KRA. And to me, I see that as a very lazy way of collecting taxes, because it's like you don't want to think outside the box. And to me, the issue of the housing levy, and I want my Kenya Kwanza colleagues to listen very well. The issue of the housing levy, just you can't tell me that the unions have said it is not good, religious leaders have said it's not good, general Kenyan public are saying it's not good, MPs in Azimio are saying it's not good, and then employees, people who are in the public service, they have said it's not good, and you want to tell me it is good. Let's be serious on a serious. Let Mr. President sit and rethink about this matter. Kenyans are saying it is not good, Mr. President. We are the people who voted for you. It is not good. Stop this thing and think about another source of revenue. It was there, I think, Maura, if you remember, was it 2018 when we introduced 1.5%?
Yeah.
And it was rejected. You know why Kenyans are saying it is not good at this time? You know, the justification about employment, the justification about slums makes a lot of sense. But the timing is wrong. When you look at the disposable income of a Kenyan today, the money he remains after all those deductions, you remain with, even if you want to do what Ruto was saying in terms of savings, you only save after you have met your basic needs. Some Kenyans, before they meet their basic needs, are already in the negative. You can't save negative. You know, can you believe there are Kenyans who are only having one meal in a day? And that meal is not a complete meal. Some are eating ugali without boga. Others are eating boga without ugali because they can't afford the uga. And then you tell such a person to save 200 shillings. Look at our own pay slips. Mwaura has been a member of parliament for 2 terms. I've been there 3 terms. Ruto is just coming. Ask Ruto is a new member of parliament. What is take home from his pay slip, if he's honest? He is surviving like I
need to defend him.
And now you want to take 3% from his pay slip.
Yeah.
We are just saying the ideas are very good, but the timing. So if I were the key guy advising the president, I would say, Mr. President, this is a very good idea, but as one of your serious economists, can we push this to next year so that we first of all stabilize the levels of income of Kenyans, and then we bring it. Look at what has happened to the fuel levy. You know, now we are saying 8 to 16. Just
yeah.
Today in the papers, kerosene is already gone up by 15 shillings. Can we ask ourselves a basic question? In this country, who uses kerosene? Can we ask that question? If you do your survey, you realize that the people in the slums, the people we are talking, the so-called hustlers in quotes, majority of them are the consumers of kerosene.
Absolutely.
And then you withdraw the subsidy. I've said personally, as an economist, production subsidies are the best from a theoretical perspective.
Yeah.
Consumption subsidies are wrong. But the thing is, there comes a time when you need consumption subsidies to stabilize the nation. And once you stabilize it, then you withdraw. What had happened during the era of President Uhuru Kenyatta, they did introduce subsidies just to stabilize the country. Now, what should be happening is we should be seeing a grand withdrawal of the subsidies, so that in a year or two, you'll have removed all the subsidies, but you'll have stabilized. Like now, we are saying we are doing away with the food subsidies, and we are bringing in fertilizer. And I said it many times. Fertilizer will take about 9 months for the mines to be in my store, so that I can take it to a apportionment somewhere and I get uga out of it. Now, these 5 months, if you withdraw the consumption subsidy immediately, and you are between month 1 to 9 before you get the maize ready, the harvest, what happens in the time between month 1 and 9? So you are likely to lose lives in between there. What you would have done is you would have still introduced your fertilizer, but then sustain the hustlers. You know, I like that word because it was their word, it's not my word. That you sustain them, and by the time then the maize is in the stores, prices will come down automatically. Okay. I can tell you for sure, Jesse, come September or October when we harvest, that is basic economics. Supply will almost outstrip demand, and prices will come down. Maura, you are an economics student, you know, these are basics of economics. By that time, prices will come down. Right. So we would have sustained this Kenya to a level. By the time the prices come down automatically, then next year there will be no need for subsidy, because we'll have now stabilized the market and continue producing. So I think basically we might be getting it right in terms of thinking, but in terms of the timing, we're not getting it right. The other thing is, can we think outside the box? There are 2 things Kenyans have never done, and I think this is the time to do them. The first one is, yes, and the team, is if you look at the number of Kenyans who are being taxed, we have always said so many Kenyans are outside the tax bracket. I think it is time we thought of how do we bring more Kenyans to the tax bracket. And for me, I think other than constructing houses for Kenyans now, if there's a way the KRA and the government could think about now, raining on the landlords in this country. The landlords. I'm a landlord, and I can tell you, normally we are told to pay 10%. And what has been happening is majority of them don't pay at all. So for me, that is a sector you could easily get in, and without doing much, you make your billions. I don't know how much you're going to collect with this 3%. Has anybody done the mathematics? How much is expected? Because I don't think it's a lot of billions. You could be able to get it from another source. So are we thinking about what other sources of income we can get of revenue streams? We can get from, and these are some of the areas. Think about bringing more Kenyans to the tax bracket. Think about doing a bit of work to get the informal sector. Also, I'm telling you, in this country, the people who are rich are the business people, are not the employed Kenyans. If you want to get more revenue, also run the businesses. But you know what business they want? Also give value for money. If you are taxing me as a business person, let also make sure that my environment where I'm operating is good, the government is doing. Because you know, some of these countries out there, when you go to Western countries, the rate of taxation is very high. Even this 25% you people talk about is very high. But what happens? Most of the basic facilities are provided by the government. You don't pay for education, you don't pay for health. So even if you got 20% of your salary, you are okay. And then the government has a lot of credit facilities, you can also access them. But you know, this is a country where we are milking everybody dry, and then I must also meet my fee issues, I must meet my health bill, I must meet my food. So you are taking everything from us and you're not giving us anything back. The other question which is important, is what we are saying. The other area I think now, and this is why to me I was saying the issue of corruption is very important. And we might need to take this serious. You know, now you also start raining on issues of corruption so that we seal all the loopholes. The government will be able to save a lot of money.
You're right.
In the process, then we'll also be able to meet some of our costs. Just have you asked yourself, NSSF has been in existence for many, many years. How come we have never used NSSF money, which is pension money, and which you can have in the long term, to construct this low-cost housing? Instead, we ended up buying land all over the country. And as a result, the people are cutting deals with this land. So also getting our priorities right. Let's look at the pension schemes who have a lot of money, which we could easily get as a government, use now because the government money, and then in the future, we'll be able to give our Kenyans the best houses.
Okay.
This country is not the first country to provide low-cost housing. Go to countries like South Africa, they have done it. Have they done it by levying Kenyans when there are people, when it's not the right time? They have not done that. So think outside the box. And if by doing that, we'll be able to help this country. The other thing which is important, like look at the issue of, because we have looked at VAT, we have looked at housing levy. The other controversial issue is the issue of, what was it? It was mentioned.
Digital content.
Yeah, the digital content.
Yeah.
These days, just the young people, that's what they are doing. Content creation, so that they make money. And I can tell you, because there's no employment in this country, so people are self-employed through that, and they're making a lot of money. Now, why do you want to run an area which is saving you as a country already? We are talking about unemployment of very high rates. People are already employing themselves by creating those contents.
But as a taxman, you go where the money is.
But that's what I'm saying. You want to go where it's easier to collect. Look at innovative way of getting more money. And then the other thing which you also need to address, and this is important. You know, in any equation, we could raise revenue by collecting more. But could we also make available resources by saving, cost cutting? And that's another area we need to look at. We need to look at the expenditure side of the equation, the expenditure. Okay. That's what we are saying. We need to look at what are we spending our money on. Are there areas we can spend, we can save? And I think Kenyans have mentioned many, many areas. I saw the other day people were talking about the travel area, where a lot of our senior people are traveling. Yeah. And anytime they travel with huge delegations, which could be reduced. Yeah. We've looked at the issue of my friend Maura cars, where we're talking about, instead of having 24, we have 50, although the president said he needs more hands. And I'm happy that Maura is there. But at the same time, you remember just one day, I think I read in the papers that this gentleman there's a gentleman who was a cast in the last administration. Yeah. And in his handing over, he was handing over to 5 cases. He has been doing all that work alone. Now he's handing to 5 of them who have come in as new. So
Okay.
I was asking myself, is it the workload has been multiplied by 5? Or is it that we are creating jobs for our friends? And we don't mind. You know, politics is a situation where you must also reward your colleagues. But I believe there are other ways we could also reward them. So the expenditure part of, we could also make some savings. So that instead of borrowing the 720 billion targeted now,
All right.
we could look internally
Okay.
and see whether we can save that money
Okay.
from our current budget
Okay.
and then move forward. So to me, I think really the issue is this bill, the Finance Bill 2023, has good intentions, but the timing is wrong. Can it be shelved for now? Think about how to finance the budget, and then come next year, when Kenyans are a bit stable, we'll have food will be there because we have fertilizer subsidies, and then that time we'll be able to have more disposable income, and we can give the government more, and then we see the government also providing services and goods back to Kenyans, so that they get value for their taxation.
Okay.
Thank you, Joseph.
So, Maura, as you come in, let's talk about the timing, because what I hear from Makali, I mean, finance bill is okay, but the timing is a little bit inconsiderate. Back to the question I had posed earlier, but equally, when it comes to payment of taxes, amesema kulipa ushuru ni kujitegemea, but there comes, with every freedom, there's a responsibility, as they say. So with paying taxes, you expect services. What are we doing to ensure that on services, the Kenya Kwanza administration is not wanting when it comes to delivery of those services that are expected once you pay tax as a Kenyan citizen?
Okay. I think first and foremost, I have to respond to the issue of the CASs.
It's hit close home.
Because David Osiani is the one who was priding himself as having been replaced by I don't know how many people. But then it's not true, because it was a CAS for industrialization. There were 2 of them with Lawrence Karanja. Now in the Ministry of Industrialization and Trade, there are 3. Kidero, my friend Vincent Kemosi, and I think Washeli, if I'm not wrong, or one of the other people.
Okay.
So I think Uhuru Kenyatta had 41 CASs, by the way. Let's not lie to Kenyans. He had 41 CASs. President Ruto has appointed 50. And then there are 51 state departments. Uhuru had 44. So let's also make these matters clear, because there's been a lot of demonization of this position just to settle political scores. And the idea that initially the president wanted 23 assistant ministers, now he wants 1 for each state department. In fact, there are 50, not even 51. I think it is something that is commendable, because there's a lot of work. And government, has expanded exponentially. And remember, we can only have only up to 22 ministries.
Okay.
So I think that needs to be explained very well, going forward. And really, there are 50 people who actually, by the way, Jesse Rogers, I'm their chairman. We are still in court anyway.
Yeah, it's still pending.
They are very gifted Kenyans, and they are people who really are in the trenches to fight for this country. And because they also constitute of former governors, former deputy governors, former members of parliament like ourselves, really, it is a very good opportunity for would-be politicians and technocrats, including former PSs, by the way, and ambassadors, to serve this country in that capacity. I am very certain, going forward, if Azimio were to take over the government, some of those people
He was waiting.
waiting in the wings. But let
Anyway,
me come to
back.
the issue of timing.
Yeah.
Dr. Makadulu has, and I respect really his views, because we served with him in the budget committee. But this is the right time.
How
Ask
comes?
me why. Because at least there's some kind of goodwill, to the extent possible, of the government. Because when you come closer to an election, people then are very difficult to convince that you need to take some painful decisions. And also, you leverage on the fact that when you start early, you'll have enough time to recover.
Allow me to cut you short. We just want to sort out a couple of in-house issues with your mic. We'll definitely come back to you. Apologies for that. But Lotte, I mean, timing is off. Well, what do you make about the timing question that has been posed? And equally, at the end of the day, service delivery is of utmost importance. How can we, boost this in order to make sure that the Kenyans at the lower cadres of society get the much-needed services?
Well, I think listening to my colleague here, and I think all of us, we all agree that we need to live at a high level of standard. The only thing is timing. That is what I'm hearing. But so in agreement, we are all in agreement that we as a country need to move from where we are to where we need to be. That I think is coming out very clearly. But let me tell you, we've actually been having levies all this time.
Yeah.
We've actually having subsidies all this time, from Moi time to Kibaki time to Kenyatta time. We've always have subsidies. There is no right time to die, and I think that is the reason why God did not give us an opportunity to discuss when we want to die. Because it is very important that there should be a cut point. The aeroplane cannot always be on a runway. It will not take off. It will always stay in the runoff unless it decides to increase speed and take off. And I think as a country, we need to reach a point where we take off. And if we continue saying we do not have the capacity to take off, we will never take off. And the reason why I come back to what I said before, I say Korea came to Kenya and saw our script, and they actually implemented it, and they took off. And now we all want to go to Korea to see what kind of developments they are.
All right.
There is no right timing for anything. And actually God, that is what God did. God did not give us time to many of the things that we see. He actually implements it as it is. Time reaches and you have to go. If we continue telling Kenyans today that there should be a right time when the economy, the incomes will be high, and then we start taxing people, we are lying. We have to sacrifice at this particular point.
Isn't that being insensitive?
The sacrifice is not being insensitive. It is to the realization that there is no right time. If we actually continue putting ourselves into debates that there's going to be a right time when the incomes of this country will be higher so that people can be taxed, the incomes of this country can never be higher, because the incomes of this country depends on the savings of these people, the people of this country. And the savings of these people of this country will then spur growth. And the spurred growth then will bring income, high incomes. So for us to start to reach high incomes, we need to save. And we need to save now. There is no right time. If you go to the preacher in church, they will always tell you, the right time is now. There is no time for a celebration of now. I think we need to take that. Let me come back now to a little bit of what our colleagues are saying. And I want to agree with them. And I say I'm a pragmatist here. I'm not looking at the party position. There are, in this proposed bill, very many good things that are not said by anybody, because they want to politicize it and say, now Kenyans are going to be taxed and life is going to be very difficult, life is going to be very expensive. Let me look at this bill. Apart from what is being said now, around 3% levy, which I said is a levy because at the end of it all is money that comes back to you. It's the money that gives you a house. Look at, for example, the issue to deal with the zero rating of unga. Nobody's talking about it. So that we all talk about unga. For us that goes to the street and carry a whole sufuria in our heads, we always say we want the price of unga to come down. This bill is addressing it. It's saying we are going to zero rate all those taxes that are on unga, on cassava, on anything that costs flour. Nobody wants to talk about that. That is a good thing, because one is going to lower the cost of living. Look at, for example, even in this tax levy, it says that the employers tax 3%, the employees tax 3%. As long as this money does not go beyond 5,000. 5,000 is the amount of money that it should not go beyond. So I don't think it goes deep into people's pockets. I know it's a time when the economy is a little bit tough. I know, and I agree. But there is a time when you have to bite the bullet and say, for me to have a higher living standard tomorrow, I need to do it today. So this particular levy has actually said, as long as both the contribution of the employer and the employee should not be more than 5,000 shillings. That basically tells you that for the people that are earning over 500,000, the people that are sitting here, they are actually going to be taxed from 30% to 35%.
Right.
Basically telling you the president is considerate of the people that earn very low, because the people that are earning higher are now supposed to contribute more for the economy to be able to improve the lives of the people that earn less. Nobody has talked about the zero rating of fertilizer, for example. And I think my brother here, Makali, said that after some times we're going to have harvests, and the laws of the economies of the supply and demand will take into place. The law of supply and demand does not just come into being. Somebody has to work on the production, and the production is being worked on. If you look at the farms this particular year, because of the subsidies of fertilizer, I'll tell you, and that's why he said so. In this year, we're going to have more harvest than last year, because there was a thinking to subsidize fertilizer, and a lot of people got subsidized fertilizer, and we're going to get, and God has given us grace to give us a lot of rain.
All right.
So that next year we're going to have the law of the price of unga will come down.
Okay.
This particular bill is addressing that in future, from now henceforth, we're going to subsidize agricultural inputs. Nobody's talking about that. This law is also talking about reduction of tax on rental incomes, so that the tenant now does not pay the 10% that he now pays. That basically means as I am taxing, as I am taking the levy of 3% from your salary, I am reducing your rent from the 10% to 7.5%. So basically we expect rents to come low, so that the amount that will have actually gone into a landlord now goes to my saving as a levy. This bill has also spoken about that. Nobody wants to say that. This has also spoken about zero rating completely taxes on retirees' savings. So if a retiree beyond an age of retirement is saving, his income or her income is not supposed to be taxed.
Right.
Nobody's speaking about that. Okay. So if you look at the whole of
Generally,
this particular
the good
bill,
outweighs the bad.
there is a lot that also speaks about how good this bill can be. Okay. But I think the politicians, me and you, have actually looked at the thing that we feel is bad. And we speak about that, and we forget to speak about the many good things that are within this particular bill.
Interestingly,
so for me, I will actually say, as much as I'm in Azimio, I do not want to stand on a party position. I want to stand on a pragmatic, real position. The real position is, there is pain, finally, there is pain. But the pain is intended for the good of this country.
And if you can have the cartoon as you come in, because it sort of resonates with what he's saying.
Before we come to the cartoon, because you know my mic was switched off.
Apologies for that.
By the cameraman, who was really laughing there. Who is really laughing there. I mean, first and foremost, let me repeat that the CAs of Uhuru are 41. So for Ruto, they are 50, and we need more people. And the president wanted to have 23, but then, of course, because of the work outlay, and there's a lot of work to be done to get this car moving, then that is why you have very distinguished gentlemen who have been governors, who have been PSS, who have been ambassadors, who have been members of parliament, both National Assembly and Senate, serving that capacity. I'm just saying that because I didn't know at what point my mic was switched off. But let me also come to the issue of timing. Azimio, I mean, spare us the charade. You want us to fail. And I will address you directly that way. Why? Because if you were to introduce these things closer to elections, there is no way they would resonate with the people. Number two, if you incite Kenyans against paying taxes, then we will not have money to execute our programs. It is a very well-calculated political strategy. And Azimio is seeing clearly, if this were to succeed, and if Kenyans are given the right kind of information, then Kenya will be sustainable. We are very alive to that fact. And let me say this, Jesse, I almost called you the ball. The issue of timing, it can never be any better. Why? Because right now, Kenyans can appreciate that we are not going to an election tomorrow. Kenyans can also appreciate that we are coming from a post-COVID era. We are coming from elections. And so, therefore, there is need to start doing, things that are going to help the economy. The reason why, for example, Azimio was doing a mandamano is exactly that, economic sabotage. Because when people don't have money in their pockets, there will be hue and cry in this country to the extent that then they will say the government is not performing. And you can actually see a very clear scheme by Azimio to make sure that the government does not take off. Even for the appointments of the PSS, there were court cases that were actually ostensibly sponsored by LSK, which is actually was Azimio leaning, because of the fight that they had with Nelson Harvey, who was our candidate in Westland Waterview. But let me come to also new ways of revenue-raising measures. Jesse, only 3 million Kenyans seem to be, bankrolling our existence as a country. About 700,000 of those who are in the public service, including parliament, and also about 2.3 million or so in the private sector. Now, what is the proposal in this new tax regime is that those 16 million hustler, those semi-permanent, semi-organized businesses. Let them also pay this turnover tax between who have a turnover of 500,000 to 15 million, because that is the capital outlay of many of these investments, which I'm sure even some of us here do own. So that then they contribute something to the kitty, so that we don't just have some few people who are salaried paying for the rest of the country. And I think that is how you bring people into the tax bracket. On issue of capital gains, I would want to report here, KRA is actually doing a very good way. They're actually going technology, so that then you are able to, and by the KRA's intelligence is very high. They will know, even if you have some rentals, the number of meters in your apartment block, so that then how many people are paying. That I can confirm. And you are going to see a very robust strategy. There's a young man called Sam Gengi who has come up with an innovation that I'm sure KRA is going to deploy to ensure that then those people who have capital investments like property are able to. So what is the strategy here? Fred Okango, who I think is more theoretical than practical, my good friend here, we debate a lot with him elsewhere. He has got the theory of how things should work. But I am telling him, we are saying what is working. The president would want to raise revenue by about 800 billion. Because currently, as Dr. Makalimu can confirm, we are raising up to 2 trillion. And our budget is about 3.6. But then we have reduced borrowing by about 500 billion. Basically saying we are not going to borrow. So these monies, we cannot even commit fully in terms of dates until this finance bill is passed. And I believe to just assuage Kenyans that if there are serious concerns on any of these proposals, there will be a give and take at some point. But then do not just make rhetoric for the sake of political overtones. There should be, so that, there's debate now. That's why we've called us here today. So that somebody says what are their views, and then we see it. Maybe if it's not 3, we can say let it be 2.5. All right. For example, that kind of thing. Those kind of graduated measures, I agree with you. Because when you remove immediately, there could be some shocks. But then also there could be some wisdom in terms of trying to deal with the issue faster. If you look at the long-term, process, that is why there is parliament. That is why people then appear before committees to submit their memorandum. But let it not be couched in political rhetoric for the sake of trying to stall the government from actually attaining its agenda. I believe that the Kenya government is very well-meaning, because all of us must succeed. Because when the President Ruto succeeds, it is for the benefit of common good of all. And let us also not try to imagine that the president does not want to be criticized. That is why he's proposed, through his memorandum to Parliament, to have the official leader of opposition position, reinstated, where ministers are coming to the floor of the House to actually be interrogated. Remember, Jesse, when, we were with you in Parliament, Dr. Mulu, when J.B. Muturi proposed that in the last Parliament, and I was in the Rules and Procedure Committee, he was told that he was trying to chair the cabinet through the back door, and it was stopped. So if there is a Mwaura somewhere who is in a certain docket, you refused CSS to come to report questions. But if there was a Mwaura somewhere coming to question, to be asked, he will be able to respond to Kenyans. People can see through who are the performers, and that will help Jesse in terms of ensuring that people can get the right information in real time.
Okay.
I think we need to just comment on what Mwaura said, and it's important to put the record straight. Jesse, when Azimio keeps on saying, address the issue of cost of living, we're actually assisting them to be popular in this country. They are so unpopular that we are helping them to do. How would you help your opponent to be popular, and then he says you're undermining him? You're
not out to derail the government?
No. We are saying we live in this country. When this kind of things are working well, we are also enjoying that goodwill. But then he says we are undermining. I don't think Azimio has any intention to undermine the Kenya Kwanza government. They have 5 years to do their things. We are trying to help them do them better, so that when it comes to after 5 years, we can now compete from a fair. But now they seem like they don't want our advice, and that's why, to some extent, we would say that can they then burn their house without us being there. The other thing which is important, just what Honorable Ruto was saying, the issue of timing. What I was saying is, we have all discussed the state of the economy. Now, this is the state of Kenyan economy. We are saying it's not timing about when the priest says, "Hakuna wakati ni sasa." The economy, the Kenyan economy, we can analyze it, we see where it is now. We are just saying this particular year is very bad for Kenyan economy, just as it is even outside the other economies. And when you are in a state of kind of recession, there are things you don't do. If you look at the basic, what we call theories of economics, Maura, you remember the issue of the big push.
Yes, yes.
These are things you do just to pull the economy out of that recession, and once it stabilizes, then you get your money. And I'm telling you, next year is not too far. They still have more 3 years to do. I'm saying there are things they can do now. They can still tax, because Kenya has already been taxed, but there are things you might introduce, and then you destabilize the whole population, and you'll have a lot of issues. There are things you can do to stabilize the population, and more so, the low-income Kenyans. Because, you know, when you look at the bottom of the pyramid, majority of us are there. And like now, when you increase the price of kerosene, I can tell you for sure, you like it or not, you're not helping the low-level income Kenyans. You're not helping them. When you put VAT up, you know the challenge is that the ripple effect of that, it will affect every Kenyan. And what is happening, the small things the Lotte was talking about, zero rating men's flour, you are giving with this hand, you are taking from us more than you are giving us with the left hand. Okay. So we need to balance this equation so that at the end of the day, you don't give us something which is good and then you take it away indirectly. But actually, as an economist, I would want to say, the issue of VAT from 8 to 16 is something Kenya Kwanza government need to rethink. It will have a very serious and adverse effect on this economy.
But the president said they've removed some levies. Is it the road development levy? But as much as they increase
they will take them away with that one. That one takes it. You know, the problem is that one affects every Kenyan. Okay. The one of the rent, yeah. I like it because, you know, that's progressive. But where they didn't get it right, you are reducing rent, the tax on rent from 10% to 7.5%. Who benefits? It's the landlords. I'm telling you, there's nobody who going to reduce this rent to a tenant because this has happened. So instead of being progressive in terms of taxation, now we are giving more benefits to the rich and taking away from the. We should think of a way of pushing more benefits to the poor by taxing the rich. Okay. That's what we call the basic principle of progression when you're doing taxation.
And as we come back, Lotte mentioned something about a subsidy and the cost implication thereafter in terms of the petroleum subsidy. Perhaps as an economist as well, kindly respond to that. But let's listen to what Okango has to say briefly.
You know, Dr. Mole has put it very well. And I think probably, Honorable Maura, you people need to make use of his brains because he's advising you people for free on this show.
For free, and
you need to pay for some of these services.
I
have listened to what Honorable Doctor was saying. He has actually highlighted some of the concessions that they have made in this bill. But remember, this is a bill. It comes as a package. The bad and the good are presented before the House as a bill. So you have to approve it or reject it. But we have highlighted as Azimio the issues we feel that are the core of the common man that need to be addressed. We are not saying that go and throw it, but we are giving them an opportunity before that time. That please, the people of Kenya have highlighted these issues. Please look into them. And Dr. Ria has done that. Number two, Honorable Lotte, I want to believe he's a good Christian. He quoted, or rather he referred to God severally. But I also want to tell him as a Christian, you know, when John the Baptist was baptizing people, there are these people who came to him, they're called tax collectors. And they asked him, teacher, you know, in the Bible, majority of the tax collectors were considered not very good people. And he asked them, teacher, what should we do? Do you know what John the Baptist told them in the book of Luke, chapter 12? He told them, go and collect not more than you should. If you look at this bill for sure, it is collecting from the already overburdened Kenyan more than they should collect. And that's what we are highlighting as Azimio. We are saying we are willing to pay our taxes as Kenyans. Kulipa ushuru ni kujitegemea. We believe in that. But don't collect more. Dr. has given issues on the deductions. When you do all these deductions, your pay slip actually you go in the negative. You cannot save even more. That is what we are talking about. So we want to ask Honorable Maura and Honorable Lotte, even though Maura speaks as a professional and as a politician, and in this context I see Lotte speak as a professional, even though we belong in the same camp. But The truth of the matter is, this regime, through this bill, they are collecting more than they should collect from the already suffering Kenyans. So be like John the Baptist, what he told the tax collectors. Please, collect less. Please, what you should.
I'm sure Lotte will tell you, give unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar.
Actually, Jesse, first and foremost, Fred Okango is inviting me to get the bill from Dr. Bakali Muru. But that's the more reason why we want more revenue-raising measures. Otherwise, as at now, the coffers are empty. And number two,
that's true.
If you read the book of John, chapter 1, verses 6 to 13, it actually clearly says, John himself declares that he is not the Messiah. He is like the best man of the bridegroom. He's the forerunner. And what does that mean? While he told tax collectors not to collect enough, Jesus Christ invited Zacchaeus to be born again and to abandon, his previous life. So the real
and he told him to calm down.
The real idea
he told him to calm
that
down.
John the Baptist was telling people to go away, but Jesus was telling Zacchaeus to come and be like one of us. So the issue that I'm also trying to tell you, Fred Okango, is that please see our side of the equation, because it didn't matter who would be president in 2022, I tell you. Even if you had taken over government, we actually moved ourselves into this mess because we had so many unbudgeted projects. There were inflated infrastructural projects. There was, of course, the expansion of the size of government. We all agree so. And that map that could have been used to navigate 2002 under Mwai Kibaki is not the same. It's like using the map of Nairobi to navigate Mombasa. We are living in very different times. If you look at the budget review outlook paper, it is very clear on the issues to do with a depreciating dollar, the issue of post-COVID shocks that are happening now, the removal of the subsidies that we are currently, we have been enjoying as a country, is because, of course, at that point the economy would have been under total collapse. And remember, there was even a debate that I even had with Peter Kenneth, whether we needed total lockdown or semi-lockdown kind of thing. We went for the second option, as we advised at that point in time, to State House, and I'm happy that they listened to us. So it is not something that would have been any different. That's what I'm trying to tell Azimio, friends of mine, that would have happened. And also, don't claim Tolote, although he can speak for himself. I thought KUP has an agreement with the Kenya Kwanza now that
they have signed now. They have signed.
With their chairman is also a chairman of Professor is also part of the government now. Yes.
But the issue is, to me, Mwaura...
We'll give him time to respond there.
Mwaura, we are agreeing. But look at when the president was being interviewed, there's something he mentioned, and I think we all remember, where he said he needs more resources to deal with some pending, is it bills in the road sector, or some roads which are not completed?
Yes,
Mwaura, we are just saying, you can just spend completion of those roads by a year, and you still do them next year. What's the need of saying we want tax Kenyans more to raise 900 billion to complete roads, when the same Kenyans cannot put a plate on their table? These to me are the basics, that all the things you are saying, if it's a matter of justification, we have very good justification. But as I said earlier, is it achievable this time? And that's why we need either we stagger it, we say, can we, for example, we can say, let's do with 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5, 6 can be done next year, so that you actually don't really overtax Kenyans. Taxation is, to me, I always say, is a must. You can't run away from taxation as a country, because that's how you develop a country. So the thing is, we need to tax, but also be considerate of the fact that where are the people we are taxing, and more so the low-level Kenyans in terms of income.
Dr. Makalibolo,
yes.
if just you allow me, let me respond to that.
Yes.
Murkomen found a roads outlay of about 900 billion.
Yes.
What has been done is that about 150 billion or so have been stayed, so that then you don't go into that, because the money that we have for roads is about 50 billion every year. So that one is something that really is being considered, because you see, like the Mau roads, which are from my region anyway, they were not budgeted, or the expansion of the Thika road, and you can mention many other places that budgets were being given right there. So they will be given in due course when money is available. But for now, actually, most of those contractors are down their tools because they don't have money. Number two, so it is gradual. That's what I'm trying to say, because if you do 150, you still have another 700 or so to deal with, and I believe that eventually that will be it will be done. So, but I hope we also need to look at the quality of roads. so that then we don't keep on redoing roads. We build roads to last. But also, Fred Okango, there's something you say that I tend to differ. You say that a country cannot tax itself out of into prosperity. That's not true. That is a justification for borrowing, by the way. And for sure, there is no country that has also developed without borrowing. But responsible borrowing requires that also you borrow locally and internally from the people who have a saving culture. If you go to China, they save up to 55% of their money. You know, that is why they are lending everybody money there, and they are advancing their goods through Belt and Silk Road, so that then they are lending us money for their goods to be transported to our own markets, and so therefore create markets for jobs for their people back there in their industries. You know, so it's also a question of strategy, because we have experimented with both, where you borrow locally, and so therefore crowd out investors. Or you borrow internationally because the rates were low, but now they are coming up. You know, so at what point then do you do? The only assured way is to encourage savings. Savings, because there are these treasury bonds that government borrows money from Kenyans. There is of course the direct taxation, but also when you have a big huge kitty, and I agree with you, Dr. Makalimulu, so that also we can reach some consensus of sorts. If, for example, we have 1 trillion shillings for pension funds. So if that then can also be diverted into this program, it's also a welcome move. But also, there are penalties and all of that kind of money for care that Kenyans have not paid, amounting to about 1.5 trillion that we are saying, if we give a tax moratorium for 1 year, Lotte, then you allow more people to come to pay. And so therefore you don't have to follow people with a whip to pay their tax. So I think let us have a sober debate, and I am happy that this is a very robust debate. In fact, I would want to submit that this is the first time we are seeing finance being debated this robustly. That tells you the real question in the last election was the economy. So that then by the time we are done with this, Kenyans will be more aware about how government is run and from what taxes and to what end. But of course, as government, we have the responsibility of improving service delivery. That is why you saw we had the signing of the performance contracts about a month or so ago, the 19th cycle, and it's under our Ministry of the Prime Cabinet Secretary, and we are very keen on that. Of course, there are some performance contract indicators there that then will also have to be looked into. That's a debate that maybe we may have another time, so that then Kenyans can get value for their money. Because if you do so, then people will be more willing to pay taxes.
Lotte, finally, as we put this matter to rest.
Thank you. I think we are in agreement. Gentlemen, I think from the discussion, taxation, we cannot run from taxation. Daktari amesema hapa. Nobody wants to run from taxation. But what I think we are all trying to say is, can we agree on how we're going to do the tax?
Okay. And
I think that is the hardest question that we are all facing. Whereas the government wants to move very quickly to ensure that we actually run ourselves out of debts, the other side is feeling that that is actually punishing Kenyans. And so on the point of agreement where we say we all need to be taxed, it is important for us to say, okay, let's now put ourselves to a national debate in terms of how are we going to get this. And I think the 3%, somebody asked, how did you arrive at the 3%? I've listened keenly to the campaigns, because we're just out of campaigns. We've not had a lot of time to actually come to the citizens post-election. But pre-election, all comes actually discussed with their citizens. And I think listening very keenly, the Azimio side, we went to the citizen and we actually asked them what they want of the government of Azimio. And I think Kenya Kwanza went to the citizens and also asked people what they want of a government. And I think all this aspiration came. I remember Maura and the team went to what we call the town halls or whatever.
The bottom-up economic forums.
Yes, and they actually had this. And I think based on this, I listened very keenly to the president. That kind of public participation was taking place at that level. And because the government was formed by them, then it is them to actually say, whatever we got from our people, we're going to implement. The question was, somebody asked here and said, I think Okango asked about why we've actually been contributing to NSSF for all these years and we have not seen the reason why NSSF is existing or why NSSF is not helping people. And it's a very clear answer to me and to you and to every other person that we've actually been contributing 200 shillings. 200 shillings is very little amount of money that can get a mass to be able to do anything. And the reason why the president said, gentlemen, 200 shillings per person cannot help the economy of this country. And we all agreed, nobody Nobody, I didn't hear anybody coming to say, the president, you're wrong on this. Because that is the reason why we are sitting here and saying NSSF has not helped anybody. So we are all in agreement that if we collect little, we cannot do anything. Now NSSF has been increased. Kenyans made a little bit of noise, but I think you will actually come to see that with the increased savings from NSSF can now be the NSSF that we want to see. And the same thing will apply to our tax. I'll ask the Kenyans, this is my appeal to Kenyans that are listening to me. The pain is going to be there, and anything good always comes through pain. Even you are told the road that goes to heaven is narrow and painful. Back to the Bible. The road to hell is wide and soft. So if you want to go to heaven, let's choose the narrow road, the painful road, but it leads to a benefit. So that is my appeal. It is going to be painful, I agree, gentlemen. I agree. For you to do anything good, you have to go through pain. And this is the pain that the president is taking us through. What I will only appeal to the government and the government side, please take care of government money. Take care of the use of these resources. Because every Kenyan is afraid of giving because they are very afraid of how these resources are going to be utilized. If Kenyans are sure that the government is going to take care of these resources, I don't even think this debate of whether we are being overtaxed is coming to be discussed here. People will give willingly if they are assured. And I think it is my call to the president to assure every Kenyan by doing this kind of action. We do not want to see Maura sitting in office if Maura is going to take our 50 bob into his pocket. Let that be taken care of, and I think Kenyans will give willingly for the good of this country. Okay, so the issue doesn't seem to be taxes as much. It seems to be the service delivery, value for money, return on investment, as economists might mention. So, and perhaps the editorial cartoon on the Star sort of summarizes this whole discussion. There are goods, there are other issues that need polishing, but at the end of the day, kulipa ushuru ni kujitegemea, but it's definitely a tough pill to swallow, as you can see on your screens right now, where Dr. William Ruto, this time is a medical doctor, is dispensing that finance pill, not the finance bill, but you can definitely see the reaction from the masses. Interestingly, most of them are wearing blue and yellow. So it's been... Exactly. Despite the political camps, I think the pleasure and the pain is felt across board. So, gentlemen, we've finished on Mambo, your finance bill. Let's enter politics briefly. And perhaps let's start with the editorial cartoon on today's Daily Nation. Definitely showing some of the developments that played out in the course of the weekend, where we saw the big two meetings that sort of set unity for deal talks. And according to the editorial cartoon, you can see the two leaders, one representing William Ruto and Raila Odinga. No smiles on their faces, but at least a handshake is there. So that seems to be progress. But you can definitely see the war dogs that are usually sent are still backing and willing to bite, but are held on a leash. I don't know if that surmounts to you, Okango. I apologize for taking you.
No, it's okay. It's fine. I know why, you know, Maura keeps bullying me on that issue.
Yes.
And sometimes you say, you know, you're making noise, but you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But let me tell you, political tact, you know, they say political tact is the ability to actually step on your rival's toe without messing the shine of his shoes. That is the tact. Raila Odinga is a political tactician. We have seen in the past, we called for peaceful demonstrations, which Maura and team thought are not peaceful. But the people of Kenya wanted a platform to air their grievances. They wanted an opportunity to tell the world and the people sitting on the power that this is wrong and this is what we wish. That wish was granted when Honorable Ruto on 2nd April reached out to Azimio leadership, Raila Odinga, Martha Kalonzo and the team, and they said he is willing to talk on the key issues we have raised. One of them being cost of living. If you look at our issues that we have tabled before the 14-member committee, bipartisan committee, number one is cost of living. We have talked about all other issues, electoral reforms. We have talked about the pending or pending constitutional issues, governance and the rest. The issue of Sava. But Raila Amolo Odinga is also a Kenyan. He understands when to retreat to advance and when to advance fully. Now, I have seen the talks on social media. The cartoon is trying to portray two gentlemen who are shaking hands, but their lieutenants, like some of us here, are trying to say, no, is it true, is it not true? What we want to tell the public, that as Azimio, we have been willing to talk. We have been willing to discuss. We have been willing to engage. But we are engaging on the basis of confidence building. We have been engaging on the basis of consensus. We have been engaging on the basis of speaking to the real issues that are affecting the common man, not the leaders. Right. Because we have seen in the past, discussions have happened, but the common man has been forgotten. And that's why in our issue number one, we have said we must address pronto the cost of living. We have said we must revisit the issues of electoral justice, because that's why we are here. Number three, we must revisit the issues of multi-party democracy, where members of parliament are elected or leaders are elected and they wake up one morning and they defy party lines and go into bed with competitors without having realizing that they are representing the views of those who voted them on the basis of that ideology. Okay. So for us, we strongly believe that this is a good gesture. Because for you to talk, first of all, you must acknowledge the wrongs done. William Ruto has acknowledged that there are issues that need to be addressed. He has extended that olive branch. We have accepted as Azimio that we shall come and talk. We have identified the platform and we have given the framework. Azimio is giving a framework. That the framework for discussion must be honest, based on the values. Okay. Number two, it must be based on consensus. Number three, it must be extra-parliamentary. Because the issues of concern are from the people, not leaders. When you limit it to parliament alone, then you lock out the views, even though you can take that report to public participation, but the views from the public. Already, our colleagues from the other side have been saying no, purely parliamentarian. But look at the nature of discussions as it's going. Hybrid. They are meeting out of parliament. They have a composition of joint secretaries who are not members of parliament. I mean, it is already extra-parliamentary, sui generis. Okay. So for me, I believe that we are in the right path. And the more we lower the tension, the better confidence for discussions we build, and the more a just outcome we anticipate in these talks.
Interesting. And I'll start with you, Isaac Moore, posing this question, because we've definitely seen a lot in terms of the bipartisan talks. But one proposal that seems to be splitting opinion is the move to clip protest rights in one way or the other. They want to institute a legal framework to regulate Article 37 of the Constitution that gives every Kenyan the right to peacefully and unarmed assemble, demonstrate, and picket. And the suggestion in this case is that the organizer of the demonstration will be required to take responsibility of sorts for the outcome of the protest. So when lawyers come out and argue that this move is a little bit cheeky and that the law that currently is there is sufficient, do they have a basis of argument?
Okay, thank you, Jesse. First and foremost is to really welcome the reduction of tensions between the two sides of the political divide, because we cannot ignore the fact that nearly half of the country voted for Raila Odinga. And I think it was a serious oversight on the part of the drafters of the Constitution to put off the first runners up and the running mate out of Parliament. I think that was a big mistake. And I've said this before, because this person or this ticket has following. And if you look at our history since 1963, we have had a de facto two-party state. So it was KANU. You can talk about KPU, but then you come to the four parties versus KANU in 1992. 1997 is DP versus KANU. 02 it was NAC versus KANU, and so on ODM versus PNU. So up to where we are now. So you called NASA versus Jubilee. So you want to have some neat way of dealing with it. But then what was the wisdom or lack of it in 2010 was that you vanquished your foe and you banished them to political Siberia because you've defeated them in a political in a presidential election. But what we are seeing is that that is not the case. There seems to be some kind of a truce that has to be negotiated post the electoral outcome. That has become a political culture. However, the crafters of the democracy, looking at the three arms of government, found it prudent to have the official leader of opposition sitting in parliament, because there's no way one party can win all the seats in parliament. And then the leader, providing leadership for their troops from there. Okay. So I think for me that is germane, and people do not seem to remember, Jesse, I don't know if I've said this before in your show, that on the 15th of August last year, President William Ruto made it clear that he placed a call to Raila Odinga, and they both agreed that whoever would be declared president, they have to have an official opposition act. So official opposition leader act, so that then you don't have Opiyo Wandayi masquerading as a leader of the minority, well, in actual sense, he's not. The real leaders of Azimio are Raila Odinga, Martha Karua, and Kalonzo Musyoka. Of course, there could be Gideon Moi, Fred Okango, but basically the Troika are really the face of Azimio. Okay. And of course, the other side, we have our president, the deputy president, Rigathi Gachagua, and prime cabinet secretary, Musalia Mudavadi, in that order. So I think it is neat. It is just a way of recalibrating our statecraft, so that then you have a better way of engaging, Jesse. Like the way you've called us here, we are essentially 2-2, so that then debate can be fair and people can see viewpoints on a balance of scale. Now, I think that has, I was in Jabini. So I was seated behind the president, and I saw the first handshake, if you can call it that way.
Yes.
And of course, well, it was not a very easy day for Raila Odinga. I said that to him after we left, because really our side was quite, that way. Yeah. But of course, the fact that they were able to move to the next event and another one is really good for the country. In fact, we clearly noted that Raila Odinga was wearing a yellow. What do you call this thing we are wearing?
That's not yellow. That's mustard.
Whichever, but it's closer to golden. It's closer to yellow than blue. And also Oparanya, the T-shirt he was wearing. But that just shows the willingness to move the country forward. Okay. And let's also not forget fellow Kenyans, because this time of the election, there was a time we were on the same side with Makali Mulu. I was nominated under accord, really. Now we are on the opposite side. We don't know what's going to happen in the next election. Who would have thought that Uhuru Kenyatta's candidate would have been Raila Odinga? So what am I trying to say is that we are all Kenyans. These contestations are temporary. And then tomorrow things happen. Titus Lote voted for Azimio. Now KUP is in Kenya Kwanza. So let us also try to look at this country so that we kind of ensure our country going forward. But then let's now come to the issue of the bipartisan talks. First and foremost, I think when there's some kind of rapprochement, in this between the protagonists, of course the backing dogs lose their steam because then what will you be backing against? What will you be backing for? And I saw Ledamba Olekina almost saying something like that. In fact, there was somebody was on the show yesterday with who did not show up. I'm happy today. There are no shows. So I think that was the same feeling we had when Uhuru reached out to Raila in 2018. But be that as it may, it tempers the issues. The temperatures down. It brings them down. There is the issue of the IBC for me. I think that is the germane. It has always been an issue. I remember way back in 2007 when Kibaki appointed the ECK commissioners. We were in Naivasha at a meeting, and it was a very huge issue. So the issue of IBC, the issue of official opposition leader, for me, those are the main issues. The cost of living is an economic question, which I think we will debate under this finance bill and going forward in terms of whether government is delivering, in terms of, Parliament providing oversight. And of course, there is the internal checks and balances within the executive. Fair administrative action. No. I think for opening server, this is my personal opinion, that is a fait accompli. Which servers are you opening? The servers were open. You could tally from wherever you are from around the world on who actually, because the polling station results were final. And the President Ruto was declared president. He is now serving. He was confirmed by the Supreme Court. So there's no way, even if you are to open, there are no servers. You see, that may have rallied the Azimio supporters. But in actual sense, we will not make much headway. If there are any reforms to be done under IEBC to make elections even more transparent than the way they were in the last election, so be it. I mean, we all want free and fair elections. In fact, let me tell you, it's amazing how we all want fairness and justice, but individually we want some undue advantage to get ahead of the pack. That is the irony of us as a people. I think it's human behavior to be selfish. But if then everybody was assured that there would be a free and fair election, that they have the same chance as being elected like any other, right. I mean, the merrier the better. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Makali, I'd like your take before you cross over to
Jesse, what happened during the weekend and what we are seeing in the cartoon is something which is very interesting for this country. And to me, the issue of the handshake is not there and all there because Ruto has come out clearly to say that he's not going to go for any handshake. So what he wants is to strengthen the other side so that we can actually do oversight and ensure that there's accountability in terms of his government. And to me, I like that position. But what was of interest, because I watched this thing I was very keen on what they were saying. And I remember that day actually, in the evening, I did tweet. When Raila was making his speech, he did say that he knows Ruto very well, and at the end of the day, he will make some noise here and there, and then the noise will end and things will cool. When Ruto was given a chance to make his speech, he did say, I know Raila very well, and I've studied him. And as a result of studying him for long, that's why I was able to beat them, combined with Uhuru. So at the end of the what they were telling us, so Ruto was saying, I know the end game of what Raila is doing. And Raila was telling us, he knows the end game of what Ruto was doing. And to me, what we should be saying is, Kenyans, since these two guys who are the principals seem to know the end game, why can they present the end game to the table and we close this chapter early enough? So that this idea of Maura and my friend Kanga and myself bickering every day here.
But remember, he said you need to step on your shoe
without messing the show. So that you just get, because the thing is, if I know the end game, Maura knows the end game. Yes. And Kenyans are all over, some are demonstrating, others are making a lot of noise, others are doing. Why can't you just present the end game and we close the chapter? But what is good is that at least now, with the team which is going to lead these talks, first of all, we have actually kind of stabilized the country. Now we are enjoying peace. Businesses are going on well. And I tell you, from where I see as an economist, this is very good for the economy because now people are going on with economic activities, which were not possible during the last about 3-4 weeks. So even as people talk in the boardrooms, Kenyans out here, they are doing their economic activities, and that is good for the country. But what is critical is the issues, now the agenda, as Bwana Ogango did present it to us, is that the issues are very clear what they are going to discuss, and we would wish to see goodwill in terms of, and faith in terms of the debate, so that whatever they're going to do, they must bear at the back of their minds that at the end of the day, we want a stable country, a country which can now settle, and we allow, if by the decision they say Ruto should continue, we allow him to do his work for 5 years. If he's not able to deliver, we have a very effective alternative government out here, waiting just to take over and push things forward. And I can tell you for sure, nothing is short the other side. It's only that that they have the chance, let them prove themselves. If they're not able, then as we will take over the government and move on. But what is very critical, what is very critical, and I like this talk about stability in this country. Yeah. What is very critical to see the leader of Azimio, Honorable Raila Amolo, and the leader of Kenya Kwanza, President Ruto, being able to be seen together by Kenyans. The fact that we saw them together in the barrio, from there they came together to Kasarani for some sporting activity. The following day they were together for another sporting activity. Was it football? Yeah. We are saying that is good for Kenya, because now Kenyans can see, even though we have gone through an election, the truth of the matter is these guys are not enemies. Each one of them was just trying to see if they can get the chance to govern this country. And now that the elections that seem to be behind us, they are now showing example that even you guys who are on both sides of the divide, you can actually start interacting without really fighting each other.
Okay.
So the only concern is that, people interpret that to be that there could be a
political deal.
a handshake into the near future in the hoping.
Yeah.
And some of us, some of us who are in Wiper, we are very concerned about because the last handshake we are left. So we are very concerned that in case there is a handshake. Although for me, I don't think we need a handshake. We just need a strong opposition or a strong minority which oversights the government and ensures that Kenyans are governed the way they should be governed. And that's my work and the work of this gentleman here.
Yes.
That is Kanu, Wiper, ODM and the other parties who form Azimio. And we want to promise Kenyans, we are more than willing to do that job. We will ensure that we put the governments on their toes so that Kenyans get the best out of this Kenya Kwanza government.
Well, a robust opposition. Interesting.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, there seems to be no permanent enemies in politics, Lotte. And it sort of reminds me of a tweet by Isaac Maora. I think he posted a picture with a former competitor in Ruiru.
Yeah. Oh, you saw it?
I saw it, yeah. We follow kidogo, yeah.
Actually, Jesse, this is the
It was
funny thing.
Lotte's chance, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Kindly.
Okay.
Even as you come in, I want you to
Okay.
react to the editorial cartoon on the Standard, because you seem to be the de facto, should I call you a pastor? Because
Yeah,
you brought up...
I'm actually a de facto pastor, and I appreciate that that has been discovered here.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think many other Kenyans
You've
will
definitely
listen.
brought it up, but the cartoon
Yeah, I'm
shows
sure.
the shift in the church standing, because their voice definitely is a voice of reason. A while back, they seem to be, guiding the sheep in one direction with a clear voice. But right now, it seems to be an instance of, I don't know if those are politicians who are guiding the church in one way or the other. So add your voice to that.
Well, personally, I think that is a personal opinion of the person who's actually doing the cartoonist. So I will not actually be able to talk about that.
Okay.
What I wanted to actually say is, first of all, to appreciate and thank the two principals, Right Honorable Raila Odinga and His Excellency Dr. William Ruto, for even accepting that this country belongs to all of us. The fact that we can actually see them together is actually a very relieving fact to every Kenyan. I think Kenyans are relieved to see these two people together. And I think this is a message that needs to go to all of them, both of them. This country belongs to all of us. And to appreciate Raila Odinga, he's actually been a statesman in this country. He's actually gone through it all. And all the time, he concedes and give it in. I think he's never want to ban this country like people have always said. I'll be very open in saying this about Raila Odinga. And these people, the Raila Odinga and William Ruto, have actually been close buddies before. If you look at the elections of 2007, the person who was actually standing on top of the table, wanting to hit Kibwitu, was Dr. William Ruto. And that basically means politics is always very dynamic. What we see now is not what we probably will see tomorrow. The other thing that I will actually say now, without blinking, is that there is handshake. Handshake is in the offing and it will happen. Handshake is a political culture in this country. If you look at Moi actually was forced to have handshake with Raila, and that's why we say Tinga elimezwa na Kanu, kuku that he was Tinga and kuku. Jogo. And actually we went through and we went to the next government. We went to Kibaki government. We actually show an handshake. We went to Uhuru government. We saw an handshake. This is not going to be different. This is in recognition of the fact that this country belongs to all of us.
But at what cost? Accountability.
It is not at any cost. It is actually our culture. It is actually developing as a culture. And so that is the reason why I'm saying today, without blinking, there is going to be handshake.
We will quote you.
Let anybody quote me.
Yes.
Because initially, there was a time when the Kenya Kwanza government would say, we will not even come close to these people. And before we knew it, there were talks. And before we know it, there's a parliamentary talk. And now we are actually seeing the principals are even shaking the physical hand. We do not know how deep that has gone into their faith. So that, for me, I'll tell you, looking at the culture of this country, there is an handshake that is coming. And this is in recognition of the fact that this country belongs to all of us. The only thing that I would want to challenge this country, and I think it was a very great oversight when we were doing our constitution, is the fact of the winner takes it all. And I think that is where the problem is. Raila feels that he has a half of this country, and he needs to actually control this government somehow, because a half of the people voted for him. 200,000 is a very, very small margin to actually separate these people, and the other one goes to hell and the other one goes to heaven. And I think we need to address that in future, now and in future, so that if you're looking at our constitution again, we need to be very critical in terms of what role is the camp that loses going to be to have in this government. It is very painful to see that Maura and the team is actually then forming the ministers, the cabinet, the government, and the other place get nothing absolutely apart from going to the streets. And I think that is the pain that we are actually seeing. This other side feels we actually also own this country in terms of our population. And so we need to address the issue of the winner takes it all. And unless we address that, we will always have a post-election tools like what we're seeing now, where people want to discuss and say, can I have something to share with you? And I think that is what has always been coming through. So I want to appreciate the fact that the two are meeting and to assure Kenyans today that this handshake is going to be on the offing base in our political history. Our colleagues here are saying we do not want an handshake of sharing government. I'm not saying that is the kind of handshake I'm talking about. In any case, all the handshakes have actually been coming with different names and different forms. So the handshake of this time, we do not know the form, but what is known is there's going to be an handshake. The form, I do not know, but it's going to be there.
Well, we need to get final comments, but equally reflect on what has been said, gentlemen, because our time is almost up. And who do I give the first honors?
I can go first.
Okay, sure.
I think I agree with what Honorable Dr. is saying. However, we have put it clear as me that we have never been interested in the handshake of sharing power. We have never been interested. But we are interested in the handshake of shaking all the hands of Kenyans into addressing the issue of cost of living, addressing the issue of restructuring the IBC, addressing the issue of multi-party democracy, and reviewing all the outstanding constitutional issues, governance, boundary review, and checks and balances, what they call it in their own words as opposition, whatever. Now, for us, we want to thank the people of Kenya for having been very patient. Even when things are not working, they have been patient, they're resilient, and today we can actually now start saying we are willing to sit down and discuss the issues of concern so that we can secure their lives. That one we can promise the country that will happen. And lastly, Raila Odinga, Martha Karua, Kalonzo Musyoka are a team. They're a team of patriotic Kenyans. And you know, as we go into these talks, we've always said, we are going into this talk with a firm belief that our intentions are pure, our goals are patriotic, and most importantly, the people of Kenya are sovereign.
Interesting. Thank you. Makali, briefly.
Yeah, just to say that, you know, today's concern of Kenyans is the issue of the finance bill. I want to assure them that as members of parliament, we do our role, and our role is to point out areas which we think should be improved to benefit Kenyans. And my appeal to my colleagues who are in the Kenya Kwanza side, more so the majority whip and the chair of finance committee, is that public participation is provided for in the constitution. Let them go out there with an open mind. They should be able to listen to Kenyans, hear what they are saying, and where there is need to change, we change. This idea of going on media and saying this law will pass because our work is to make sure that government business passes is not good for this country. We want to go out there to the public with an open mind, listen to them, and where things should be improved, we will improve them. Where they should not be improved, we say we should not be improved. At the end of the day, succession will take place. The other thing I want to say is that at the end of the day, parliament decisions are made on the basis of majority and minority in terms of voting. And my wish is that even as we vote as members of parliament, let's vote for what is going to be of benefit to our Kenyans, and more so, Kenyans at the lowest level of the pyramid, so that at the end of the day, we save these Kenyans who seem to be really just surviving. Okay. And we always have chance to improve situations as we move to the future. My closing remark is that just say we belong to this country, we should serve this country. So none of us has any interest to make sure that Kenya goes the wrong way. We want Kenya to go to the right direction. So even the statements we make when we come to these shows is to make sure that at the end of the day, we have a better country for us today and for our children and for our future generations.
All right, that's a collective goal. Thank you so much. Maura, briefly.
Yeah, I think one day in 2014, we had tried to reduce the budgets of the country in the right direction, and Makali Molu, you can remember.
Yes.
Then we were called to State House and we were given a serious dress down. The rest is history. But if we had continued doing what we had started that time, because it was a bipartisan approach, I think we would not have been in this problem that we are having. Because what we were trying to do is to reduce wastage in government. So my clarion call, noting what has happened to civil servants or public servants who were just recently appointed, is that when you sit down to serve this country as a public servant, always remember it's not about yourself. It's not about how rich you can be at the end of the day. If you do what is right, even if the tide may be against you, eventually you get vindicated. And if we are to borrow a leaf from other jurisdictions and democracies that have been able to develop, it's because at a certain point in time, somebody made the right kind of decision, and this is the wisdom hour.
Asante. Lote, finally.
Well, thank you. I believe that Kenya is one, and Kenya will always stand against all the adversities. The finance bill notwithstanding, we still have a country. This is the economic part of it. We still have the social part of Kenya, which nobody has discussed today. We've discussed the political part. We have not discussed the social part of this country. There is a lot that needs to be developed in this country. If you go out of this country like I went last week, I realized that we are giving too much to our friends and our foreign friends that are in this country. I went to Ethiopia, and I thought I needed to speak about that. I found a Kenyan who was supposed to deposit 10 million shillings before he can start a business, a small business, a restaurant business. And he talked about this and he told me, if you can tell this to a government, it is important. There is the aspect of reciprocity. I actually saw in a tweet last week about Kenyans that went to Tanzania and they were actually terrorized by the police from the way they entered into Tanzania until when they got out of Tanzania. We actually, as Kenyans, we give a lot to our friends and our foreigners and our relatives and anybody else that is outside this country. I think we will need to have a discussion in terms of how we actually create the aspect of reciprocity, so that if we are treated in a manner in another country, we also need to treat others the way they treat us. Otherwise, then we become a place where people come and do everything wrong to us, and when we go to their countries, when they come here, we do everything good to them. 10 million shillings to start a restaurant business. I don't think we charge any person that comes to this country. And so that could also be another source of revenue to this country. So that if you're coming here, you deposit an amount of money so that we raise our revenues, just as an aspect of Maura and the team to look at it as a way of